You spot a dog on the other side of the street. You don't know this dog. You've never encountered this dog before. There's no history between you, no shared moments, no common acquaintances. And yet, somewhere beneath your ribcage, something ancient stirs. Your arm lifts, your fingers bend inward, and your brain issues exactly one instruction: touch the dog. And before your conscious mind has caught up to any of this, you're folded down onto the sidewalk producing noises you would be mortified to make in a meeting room, murmuring, "Hey, baby," to a stranger's golden retriever as though this is perfectly reasonable behavior. Here's the wild part. It is. Because this isn't a you thing, it's not a dog-person thing, a cat-person thing, or a grew-up around animals thing. This is a behavior that cuts across every culture on Earth, runs straight through our neurology, and is almost embarrassingly universal. We pet dogs, we pet cats, we pet rabbits, horses, capybaras, the occasional deeply bewildered lizard. We reach towards soft coats, floppy ears, warm bodies. We see a small creature and our hands simply move. Nobody instructs them to, they just go. And no one has ever truly, properly explained why. Until now. Let's start with the obvious: is it just that animals are cute? That feels like the clean answer, doesn't it? You see something cute, you want to touch it. Done. Everyone go home. But here's where things get genuinely interesting. The cuteness instinct is considerably more complex than it appears on the surface. When you look at a creature with wide round eyes, a tiny nose, full cheeks, and a forehead that dominates the rest of its face, your brain doesn't produce some vague, pleasant warmth. It enters a very specific neurological state that researchers have been examining seriously for decades. The foundational theory came from an Austrian ethologist named Konrad Lorenz back in 1943. He called it Kindesschema, German for baby schema. His argument was that certain physical features activate caregiving instincts in adult humans: a round face, oversized eyes, a small chin, soft contours, unsteady wobbly movements. These features evolved in human infants as a way of hijacking the adult brain and compelling those adults to protect and nurture. Evolution isn't particularly subtle. It essentially built a visual exploit straight into your neurological operating system and called it a baby. And Lorenz's insight, which was genuinely remarkable for its time, was that these same features, when present in other species, trigger an identical response. Your brain doesn't care that the creature in front of you is not your offspring. It doesn't run a species check. It registers large round eyes and a small face and immediately fires the caregiving circuitry. And just like that, you're feeling a protective, almost parental pull toward an animal you met 14 seconds ago in a parking garage. What makes this extraordinary is that Lorenz worked all of this out in the 1940s with essentially no brain imaging technology. He was just observing people respond to things and writing it down. And then decades later, when researchers actually placed people inside fMRI machines and showed them photographs of cute baby animals, he turned out to be almost entirely correct. Specific, identifiable brain regions light up: the orbitofrontal cortex, areas tied to reward processing, structures associated with emotional salience and motivation. Looking at a cute animal is not a passive experience. It is a measurable neurological event. Your brain is actively doing something. It is responding to what it sees the way it responds to things that genuinely matter. Things that carry emotional weight. Things worth attending to. Things worth caring about. And crucially, all of that is happening before you've even made contact. Because touch is an entirely separate layer sitting on top of all of this. And this is where it gets really good. Here's something that doesn't receive nearly enough attention. The human sense of touch is absurdly sophisticated. We tend to treat touch as a single sense, but it's actually a collection of distinct sensory systems operating at the same time. Your skin is covered with numerous types of mechanoreceptors, specialized sensory cells that each respond to different kinds of physical contact. Some respond to pressure, some to vibration, some to changes in texture, some to shifts in temperature. And one specific type, studied in greater depth relatively recently for its role in emotional and social touch, is called C-tactile afferents. These are nerve fibers tuned almost precisely to one particular kind of contact. Not firm pressure, not sharp sensation, not rapid movement, slow, gentle, soft stroking at roughly 1 to 10 centimeters per second. When these fibers are activated, they send signals not only to the somatosensory cortex, the part of your brain tracking where and how you're being touched, but to regions associated with emotion, social connection, and reward. These fibers essentially exist to make gentle touch feel emotionally significant. Not just physically registered, significant. And here's where everything connects. Running your hand slowly across soft fur activates tactile afferents almost perfectly. The texture, the warmth, the gentle give, the steady pressure. It's as though fur was built to interface with this exact sensory system. Pet a dog and you are literally activating a neurological pathway that evolved for social bonding, now firing because of a Labrador. This is not a metaphor. This is chemistry, specifically oxytocin. Oxytocin, sometimes called the love hormone, though neuroscientists have grown a little wary of that reductive label because it does considerably heavier lifting than that. Oxytocin is released during positive physical contact. It's released when you embrace someone you love, when you hold an infant, when you engage in physical affection of virtually any kind, and multiple well-designed studies have demonstrated that just a few minutes of interacting with a dog, petting it, holding eye contact, simply being physically close, produces significant elevations in oxytocin levels in humans. We're talking measurable spikes in blood concentration of a bonding hormone from a few minutes of dog contact. And here's the part that almost doesn't seem fair given how wholesome it is: the oxytocin spikes in the dog simultaneously. You are holding eye contact with a dog, running your hand along its back, and you are both, you and the dog, experiencing the same neurochemical response that bonds parents to their children, that binds partners to each other, that underlies some of the deepest social connections humans are capable of forming. You walked up to a stranger's dog on a sidewalk and accidentally fell a little bit in love with it. And so did the dog. And that is not sentimentality. That is biology doing exactly what it was built to do. But let's pull back, because there's another angle here that most people never think about. Why soft things specifically? Why is fur the thing that undoes us, and not, say, gravel? Why don't we feel an uncontrollable urge to stroke a brick wall? Why does texture matter this much? Part of the answer lies in tactile memory and early association. Humans, as infants, spend an enormous portion of their early existence pressed against warm, soft things: skin, fabric, blankets, other bodies. The connection between softness and safety is established extremely early in development, well before language, well before conscious memory forms. It gets written into your nervous system as a baseline assumption. Soft things equal safety. Soft things equal proximity. Soft things equal comfort. And that association persists across your entire life in ways your conscious mind almost never notices. There's also the temperature dimension, which tends to be underrated. Fur is warm, and warm things communicate at a very deep neurological level that something is alive. When you place your hand on something warm and slightly yielding, there is an almost immediate reduction in measurable physiological stress markers. Heart rate drops slightly, skin conductance decreases, cortisol levels begin to fall. Your autonomic nervous system is recognizing the warmth as another living body nearby, and it responds by dialing down the threat response. You are physiologically relaxing, not because you chose to, but because your body registered warmth and concluded, something alive is here. We're okay. And then, and this one matters, there's the sound. Because this is not only about touch. There's what you're hearing while all of this is happening. Cat purring has been studied extensively in biology and increasingly in therapeutic settings, partly because the more carefully you examine it, the stranger and more compelling it becomes. The sound is generated by rapid movement of the laryngeal muscles. A cat's larynx vibrates dozens of times per second as the animal breathes both in and out, producing that continuous, low rumble. The frequency of a typical domestic cat purr falls between 25 and 150 Hz, with the most common range sitting between 25 and 50 Hz. And here's where it gets genuinely strange. Frequencies within that specific range have been documented in clinical settings to encourage healing in bone tissue, reduce inflammation, and speed recovery in soft tissue injuries. There are physical therapy protocols being developed that use mechanical vibration at precisely these frequencies to help patients heal more quickly from fractures and muscle damage. So when a cat is purring against your chest, you're not just hearing a sound. You are being gently vibrated at a frequency that may actively support biological healing in your own body. Cats walk around being accidentally therapeutic. They are sitting on your laptop and ignoring you, and auditing the structural integrity of your bookshelf, while their bodies passively emit frequencies that might be beneficial to your bones. They are doing absolutely nothing for entirely their own reasons and inadvertently providing physical therapy. And we still find them completely irresistible. We should. They are extraordinary. Now let's address the compulsive dimension of all this, because I think this is genuinely the most fascinating part. It's not simply that petting animals feels good. Plenty of things feel good, and we manage to restrain ourselves around them in public. The strange thing about animals is that the urge seems almost impossible to override. You know intellectually that you're supposed to ask before petting the dog. You know the cat at your friend's place has already issued 2 unambiguous warnings. You do it anyway. What exactly is going on there? Part of it is approach motivation. When your brain identifies something as potentially rewarding and cute, soft, warm animals are essentially triggering every reward signal your brain is capable of generating. It creates a motivational pull toward that thing that arrives before conscious decision making. You're not thinking, I want to pet that dog. The motivational circuitry has already moved your hand. Your conscious reasoning is catching up to something your body already initiated. The same core reward, approach circuitry that propels you toward food when you're hungry, or toward someone you find attractive, is generating the impulse to close the distance and make contact with the animal. You are, in the most literal neurological sense, drawn to it. Then there's something researchers have begun calling cute aggression, which sounds alarming and is actually fascinating. It's the experience of encountering something so overwhelmingly, almost unreasonably adorable that a strange, intense, almost aggressive impulse arises in response. Wanting to squeeze it, saying things like, I could just eat you up. Making small threatening gestures towards something you obviously have zero intention of harming. If you've ever stared at a puppy and felt an inexplicable urge to aggressively smoosh its face, you are experiencing cute aggression. Researchers at Yale studied this seriously and found that it isn't random. It appears to be a regulatory response produced by the brain when something generates an overwhelming volume of positive emotion, more than the system can comfortably process. The brain generates a countering negative impulse as a homeostatic mechanism, a way of balancing the load. The sudden I want to compress this animal into another dimension impulse is your nervous system attempting to manage the quantity of positive response it's receiving. Your brain is overwhelmed by how cute something is and is not handling it with particular grace. Which means the slightly unhinged things you want to do to kittens are a sign that your brain is functioning correctly. You're welcome. Now here's a question worth sitting with. Is any of this uniquely human? Are we the only species that experiences this pull toward other species? The answer, interestingly, is kind of no. There are documented observations of primates in wild settings approaching animals of completely different species and engaging with them in ways that serve no obvious survival purpose. Carefully handling small animals, engaging in what appears to be play, exhibiting what researchers describe with appropriate scientific caution as apparent gentleness and curiosity. Capuchin monkeys have been filmed doing this. Bonobos have been observed in situations that look remarkably like cross-species socializing. Great apes in captivity regularly develop affectionate, tactile relationships with other animals they share space with, not just other primates but dogs, cats, birds, rabbits. Coco, the gorilla who was taught American Sign Language over decades of research, had several pet cats throughout her life. She requested them using signs. She named them herself. She handled them with consistent gentleness. When one of her cats died, she produced signs that her researchers interpreted as expressions of grief. A gorilla grieving for a small domestic cat because she had bonded with it. Because being near it and touching it had carried meaning for her. Because the relationship between a large primate and a small, warm, fuzzy animal was real and it mattered. Touch is not a human invention. The drive toward it is ancient, and it runs through far more of the animal kingdom than we typically acknowledge. And if you want to understand just how ancient this really is, you have to look at coevolution, because the relationship between humans and dogs specifically is not coincidental. It is not simply that dogs happened to be present and we adjusted to them. It is the product of an estimated 15,000 to 40,000 years, depending on which research you consult, of genuine mutual adaptation. Humans and dogs have been living alongside each other, working together, sleeping near each other, and touching each other for so long that we have measurably, biologically changed one another. Dogs are uniquely attuned to human social cues in ways that their closest wild relatives, wolves, simply are not. Even wolves raised by humans from birth. Dogs follow human pointing gestures spontaneously. Dogs track where human eyes are directed. Dogs make eye contact with humans in a way that is functionally and neurologically distinct from how wolves do it, and that eye contact activates the same oxytocin loop we discussed earlier. But here's the detail I find almost too remarkable to be true. Dogs have developed a specific facial muscle, called the levator anguli oculi medialis, that is either entirely absent or dramatically underdeveloped in wolves. This muscle is responsible for the inner brow raise, the puppy eyes expression. That look a dog gives you where its brows lift and its eyes go wide and something in your chest just completely gives way. Dogs evolved an anatomical structure specifically for producing that expression. It is not accidental. It is the result of thousands of years of selection pressure favoring dogs that were more effective at generating positive emotional responses in humans. Dogs that were better at getting humans to touch them, feed them, keep them nearby. The puppy eyes are not cute by coincidence. They are the product of an extraordinarily long process of figuring out exactly what makes human hands reach forward. Dogs didn't get domesticated passively. They participated. They co-wrote the relationship. And every time you reach out to pet one, you're responding to tens of thousands of years of remarkably deliberate social engineering from the other direction. We didn't domesticate dogs. We domesticated each other. What's worth sitting with? And I think this is genuinely the most important piece of everything we've covered, is what happens to us when touch is taken away. Not just human touch, any touch, because touch deprivation is a real, measurable, physiological stressor. During periods of enforced social isolation, people who have pets consistently show better mental health outcomes, lower baseline cortisol, lower rates of depression and anxiety, compared to people who don't. And researchers have been careful to examine whether this is simply about companionship in the abstract, having another presence in the space, or whether the physical contact itself is doing specific work. The evidence increasingly points to the physical contact being a meaningful and distinct component. The hand moving through fur, the animal settled in the lap, the warm weight of a body against your leg, the actual tactile experience of touching something that is alive. In hospital environments, animal-assisted therapy consistently reduces perceived pain, lowers anxiety ahead of medical procedures, and improves emotional well-being during recovery. And these are measurable outcomes, not impressions. Therapy dogs in schools lower stress responses in children during high-pressure moments. And the timeline on all of this is fast. 10 to 15 minutes of interacting with an animal, actually touching it, produces statistically significant changes in cortisol and oxytocin levels. Your nervous system is not slow about this. It knows what it needs, and it responds quickly when it receives it. We need this more than we let on. And maybe that's the real reframe for everything we've explored today. We treat the impulse to pet animals like it's an amusing quirk, an endearing human flaw, the thing responsible for making you 10 minutes late because you got ambushed by a dog on the pavement. But what it's actually pointing toward is something far older and far more serious. Touch is how mammals signal safety to one another. It is one of the primary mechanisms through which we regulate each other's nervous systems. It is how we communicate, without language, something like, "I see you. I'm here. You're not alone. Everything is okay." For the vast majority of human history, we lived in constant close physical proximity to animals. Working animals, animals we raised, animals that slept near us for warmth and protection and company. The physical and psychological distance between humans and animals that we now treat as normal is extraordinarily recent in evolutionary terms. Almost cosmically recent. And our brains, our nervous systems, our reward circuitry, none of it has caught up. All of it is still expecting to be near warm, soft, living things on a regular basis. You were never going to not pet the dog. The only question was always how many seconds it would take.